Hello and welcome back to this course of videos on Node.js. In this video we'll be discussing modules. Now we mentioned module object when we were discussing the global object, as module is actually a child of the global object, which means it can be used, accessed from anywhere within your Node application. To look at an example of why we would use modules, let's say this is an application that I was writing. It's actually some code we wrote in some earlier videos when we were discussing functions. However, this could be 4 million lines of code. It could be a massive application. Now, I wouldn't want to have all my code on one particular JavaScript file. I would want to break it out into separate files purely for code organization. And modules allow us to do this. Another good reason for using modules is if I have a particular function that I want to use at multiple different places in my application, I don't want to have to rewrite that function every single time. I want to write it once and then have it available to my other files without having to rewrite it. So that's another benefit of using modules. So basically, a module is just a JavaScript file. So I have created something here called module.js. Now, I can make this a module. Each JavaScript file is a module. Now, this code here, let's say I want this code, this in module.js, this is simply this object that we created in a previous video. I want this to be made available to app.js. Now, right now, this object here is just in module scope, in local scope. It is not available. App.js has no visibility of my object, and we don't want it to, because as we spoke before, we don't want to pollute the global scope. We want to keep things separate. However, I've decided in this case, I do want my object made available to app.js. Now, the way I can do this is with this method down here, module.export. So exports is a child of the module object, which in turn, as we said before, is a child of the global object. Now, if I just go to git bash and we can look at what exactly is module.exports. If I go to my git bash here and I execute my Node application, I am just going to type module.exports and let's see what it is. It's an empty object. It's simply just a container. Think of it like a container that we can use to export objects from our files and make them available to other files. So in this case, module.export, this empty object that we looked at, I'm actually going to fill it with my object here. And what that's going to do is make my object be available to app.js. Now, I've exported this object from module.js. At app.js, in order to actually get visibility to it, we need to use the require method. And again, require method is another property of the global object that's available anywhere in Node. Now, require method takes one single argument, which is the reference to the file that you want to import, that you want to have available. So module.js is in exactly the same folder as app.js. So all I do is put the / and then module. And so what I'm actually doing, when I do require module, it's going to look into module. It's going to say, okay, what object has been put into like my module.exports container. So it's going to look, what object's been put in there for me to view? And it's going to see my object. And so my object from module.js, this object here, will now be populated into this variable. And we can prove this by calling the child property of this object called myAnimal is the child property, which is cat. We're going to call it using dot notation. We're going to console log here. So I'm just going to check that everything's saved on both of these, and then I am going to run app.js and let it call this object from module.js. If I go back to my git bash, I'm going to have to exit out because I'm currently running Node. I'm going to cd to the file, so it's cd code node. So this is the folder in which app.js resides. So now I am going to run that at JavaScript file by saying node app. Don't have to put .js. And then when I run this, you can see it returns cat because it imported my object from module.js, and it's logged out the my animal property. Now, another thing that we can do, we mentioned before about not wanting to rewrite functions all through our application, only writing them once. So when we imported this object, we also imported this function, which is a method, really, it's strictly speaking. It's a method, a property of my object. Now, I could actually create a function expression and attach that function from here and attach it to this function expression and then call it. So what I'm doing here, again, imported object has all these different properties on there, including the method, the function, and I am going to, let me just comment this out first of all, and so I am going to, on the imported object, I'm going to call my function, I'm going to attach my function and create a function expression, and then I'm going to call my function expression, which should console log this out. So let's now save this, and we'll run app.js again, node app, and we'll see I am a function inside an object. So this is a great way, like I said, I can create this function in module.js, and I can use it all throughout my application in different files, in different modules, without having to rewrite the function. So that is your introduction to modules. We'll be using them a lot in future videos, and I look forward to seeing you then.